Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. Folks, we have quite a show today. There's been all sorts of events here in the city of Portland, Oregon. We've had demonstrators here for the last 2 weeks. We had the ISIS situation, and most of those, I went down there, and most of those folks were out of town. And as you know, they left us with the bill. And then now, all of a sudden, this Sunday, yesterday, we had another demonstration. And the demonstrators were told that they would all congregate near the waterfront, if you will, and folks were still trying to get their coffee and walk down. They said no, they had it all fenced in and to accommodate the folks who were going to be demonstrating. And all of a sudden, the folks came down and said, we're not going to go in that enclosure. We want to march downtown. And so they just proceeded to just going on downtown. And as you know, if you were looking at TV and whatever, it was interrupted every so often. But my point is that we've got some major issues here. But the other thing is that besides those issues, racism still exists here in the city of Portland. I mean, right up front with you. And at the front of the line is the person that normally gets the race, if you will, that normally gets the hit, in most cases, are black people here in the city of Portland. And you ask yourself, well, why is that so? Because in all due respect, many of the demonstrators that I saw yesterday, a day before that, they were all supporting, i.e., blacks, as far as civil rights and this, that, and the other. But when I saw ISIS, and in fact there was an article or two about that whole issue, because in that article it said that many of the demonstrators, I guess it was on the folks who were protesting and who were then basically squatting, were basically sitting there and demonstrating, were calling the folks who are either working for the federal government or blacks that were on the Portland Police Department, excuse the French, and calling them niggers, right there. What's going on? Well, anyway, I got an answer for you today. We're going to talk to someone who's been dealing in that issue and has been on this show for several times for that matter, and has worked very, very hard to try to assimilate i.e. the American dream here within all our various cultures. And I'm talking about Donna Maxey. She has an organization that she founded. She's founded and the director, and it's called Race Talk, and has a history of about how she started in this deal. And she's got quite an interesting background too. Besides being one of the queens, one of the Rose Festival queens, and plus the fact she had a dynamo dad, if you will, and I think I reincarnated in him. And I've been involved in all kinds of things. And Mr. Maxey was tough. And I think he gave me the baton, and I think I've been out there for quite some time. But anyway, I can go on and on and on about a number of things about this lady and her family and her many involvements here within our community, state of Oregon, and elsewhere around the country for that matter. And that is Donna Maxey. So Donna, we're going to welcome you aboard, and we got a couple of things we want to really talk about. We're going to take the whole hour, by the way. The first half hour, we're going to talk about her, and we're going to talk about how she got in this whole issue of race talk. And then after we've done that, she's got quite an exciting event that's going to be coming up, and we're going to talk about that in the following 30 minutes, the half of the show. And this is a historical event for that matter. We got two black women that we all know. They're dynamic in their own way and whatever. And in all due respect, it's a very timely kind of an election, because I'm talking about Joanne Hardesty and Loretta Smith. It's going to be very timely, because our young mayor needs some help. In all due respect, we got Nick Fish, who's a very neat guy, very likely guy. In all due respect, he's been struck now with this sickness, this illness, and he's having a tough time. But as you know, he just recently won his election, and then so he's going to be in for another 4 years, and he's got some tough time. And we wish him all the best to recover out of this whole issue of this cancer thing that he's involved in. And then Dan Salzman, who's going to be leaving, who was another senior person. And in fact, that's the seat that the two of them are going to be doing a runoff come November the 2nd, I think it is. That's the runoff aspect of it. And so that's going to be and it's a first. It's a first for these two women. And by the way, and I'm just being just little quickie notes. The other thing is, and this is why you need to watch this. The other thing is that the mayor, Ted Wheeler, did not endorse either one. either one. And both have had their issues with our young mayor, Mayor Willard. And I've also Facebook often to say, look, this guy needs some help. He does need some help. He's new. He's young. He was, excuse the French, he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and he was from Oregon and from Portland for that matter. So he needs some help. He's got a lot of energy, but in all due respect, he's of the Millennium Clan, if you will, and so I can go on and on and on. But it's going to be very exciting. So that's going to be the 30 minutes that we're going to spend, and just chat a little bit about it, so you can see why it's so important and a very timely race and a very exciting race, because we definitely need someone. We definitely. So anyway, we're going to do that the second half hour. So with that, I'm done now. I'm going to give this thing now over to Donna. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you.
You're doing well.
Yes.
Okay,
I'm
cool,
doing great.
cool.
I do have to correct you though, Bruce. I was not a Rose Festival queen.
You won the Rose Festival?
No.
Well, I'm making you one. I'm going to anoint you today.
No, I was a Rose Festival princess
A princess?
for Elliott School.
Oh, you were a princess?
I was a princess.
Oh, my God. What did I get to do?
I don't know.
I don't remember that.
Maybe the king of jazz here in Portland, Mel Brown, was a Cub Scout, and he and his dad's Cub Scout troop pulled my covered wagon.
Really?
It was 1959. Mel
be
and the
kidding.
Cub Scouts pulled my wagon in the Junior Rose Parade.
Awesome. Oh, was there any drummers? Were they doing any drums in? Did they have drums in the?
No, I don't think so. There were drummers in the Rose Parade.
But he wasn't. But
no.
they were the one pulling it. Mel.
They were pulling my
Mel,
my
did
wagon.
you get that? You sure? I want some photos. We got to do a show. You and Paul. Okay. Well, come on. Let's talk about this deal. Let's talk a little bit about yourself and sort of educate the folks out there and about who you are and your roots here in the city of Portland.
Well, I'm from Portland.
Right.
I was born here at Emmanuel Hospital. Grew up, as I like to say, I went to all the best ghetto schools.
Okay.
I went to Boise, and then I went to Elliott, and then I went to Highland, which later became Boise Elliott Humboldt.
Okay.
Elliott became Harriet Tubman, and then Highland became MLK. And then I went to Jefferson and left there and went to Pacific University and majored in education, and went to California and taught. So my first love is teaching. My favorite peeps are third graders.
Okay.
But I've worked with everybody from preschoolers through adults.
Okay.
So, but I still love third graders the best.
Okay. Well, before we get too far in that deal, what about Mom and Dad? Now, Mom is still here with us now. Dad was here, and he really was an activist during those particular times.
Oh, he was.
And Mom still is an activist.
Yes, she is.
Okay.
Well,
Spend a couple
Mom
minutes with them, please.
in a couple of weeks will be 99.
99.
99.
Wow.
Most people don't live to be 99.
Oh, wow.
And not only and then those who do don't usually have teeth.
Right,
I
right.
just took her about 3 weeks ago to get a tooth pull.
Come on.
So she's
Well,
hanging
she's
in
solid
there.
as a rock.
she's
That's why I
hanging in
want to
there.
make sure you shared that.
Yes, she will be 99.
And then a little bit about Dad. What about Dad?
Well, my dad was an activist,
Yes, he
as,
was.
as he used to say, if there's a fight, I'm there. And, I think about my parents and I admire them so greatly because they came from the South. They came from East Texas. And if you look at the map from the lynching museum, there were more lynchings in East Texas than there were in parts of Mississippi and Alabama, where the museum is. And so it was a pretty rough area. And they came north looking for opportunity, didn't know who was here, didn't know what was here, but they came north looking for opportunities. And they had never voted in the South. So when they came here, my father was always a very independent person. So most black people went east, so he went west. Most black people went to California, so he went north. Most black people went, not even just black people, period. Period. Most people went to Washington, so he went to Oregon. Most people signed up to be Democrats, so he was a Republican. So
Sounds familiar.
He said it did not make, he said, I don't know that either of them have done anything for black people per se. So, might as well see the Republicans are in charge here in the state of Oregon. So I might as well join and see what's going on. So he was compatriots with Mark Hatfield, who became governor and then our Congress senator, and also with Clay Myers. And there was a family in Malala that we were friends with. We used to go visit them every year. I think his name was Bill English, and he was in the state legislature. So, and I think I probably knew this, but there was someone who had done some research on my dad and said, "Yeah, your dad was the president of the Young Republicans for Multnomah County." I'm like, "Oh, okay," But he was just daddy. He was just daddy.
yeah.
I didn't know all
Yeah,
that other stuff.
yeah.
We always had people coming and going in the house, and my mother was the consummate housewife, mother, homemaker, and so whoever he brought they ate. So they were both very active in politics and in community organizations, and in supporting children, PTA, Little League, junior ball, what do you call it, after school. I'm recovering from 2 concussions, so sometimes I forget my words.
I understand.
But
Businessman, independent businessman.
he was an independent businessman,
Yep.
and then also after school Bible class, and
Okay.
mom
Wow.
registered voters and did
Yes.
Campfire Girl, and so they were highly active. So I'm an activist from being in utero. So I had no choice but to decide to go ahead and be involved in doing that. And part of that was my folks had a mom and pop in the kids' grocery store, and being in the grocery store, I saw a lot of people who were older than my parents who could not read or write. And that really bothered me, and I wanted to know, I decided I was going to teach adults so that they could learn to read and write. And Daddy had been a teacher in the South, but was unable to be hired here in Oregon because they were afraid that him being a big buck, he would maybe molest little white girls. I don't know what it is about white women. I really worry about them because their sexuality it just drives men crazy. So I've always worried what was going to happen to them. But anyway, so he wasn't able to teach here in Oregon. So he became a barber, which had been his avocation in college. That's how he earned extra money when he was in college. So he ended up going to barber college and became that, and still did his activism. And when he was in college, he joined the NAACP, and it was at a time when, had they known, he'd have gotten kicked out of school because it was a radical organization at the time. So, but he also is a second-generation activist because his father was a union man.
Wow.
And in fact, he was killed doing union work. So, yeah.
Gee, Donna, that's quite a bad. In fact, I wanted to share that with you folks. I've heard it, but I wanted you to hear her background somewhat to get you a sense of how she became a founder of such an organization like Race Talk. You know what I mean? And like I said, let's jump right up into that in terms of how did that become? I've read the piece, but you tell us.
I've done race work, as a child in the Urban League and NAACP, and
you were going to you were teaching at that point in time. You were in the classroom.
Right. I was here teaching in Portland, and I taught in California. I taught in Westland 1 year. I have always been the first and only, and so much so that I don't have to be the first or only anything ever again in this life or the next. It's a real burden. It's a real burden. But what I was working with Portland Public Schools, former superintendent Carol Smith brought about change by enacting courageous conversations about race. And it was a curriculum that really spoke to people. We were a beacon school, the school that I was at Cesar Chavez, and one of my colleagues who was a mean person. I had white folks in my office crying from this person.
Really?
And so these were things that this person, we were doing an activity about race. It was about Cesar Chavez and the growers and the protests that were marching through California. And we were to look at this problem from different points of view. And this person using this format got it. understood and was able to see from the standpoint of, because we changed different points of view from the, we had to figure out who were the people involved, the growers, the police, the marchers, the protesters, all those people. And so each of us had to tell the story from that person's point of view. This person was able to tell the story from the protest marchers and understood why they would feel the way they did and why they were marching. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is powerful. This is powerful, and we need to take this out to the public. One of the things that caught my attention more than was the factoid that by 2040 there will be more people of color in the United States than there are white people. That was over 10 years ago. I knew that the behavior that is being exhibited today in the streets and on the airwaves would be exhibited by the white population. It's very threatening. It's very threatening when you've been told that you are superior, when you've been told that you are better, that the front of the line is for you and the back of the line is for other people. It's very threatening to think that, and a group of people has not been kind to people who are underneath them, who don't have as many rights. Then the question is, are they going to do to me what we've done to them? And I have not heard a single person of color of any ethnicity say that they want to act like they have been treated, because they don't want to become those people who have treated them poorly. And it's not, racism is a very interesting thing. I think, a lot of white people don't get very upset when they hear that they have privilege, and they say, well, I don't have privilege, I work hard. And the Civil Rights Bill was passed, and so those things are different. And privilege is relative, but white people do have privilege. They just don't realize how much. And they say, well, I work like a dog, I work hard. Well, they do work hard, but we have to work harder. As people of color, you have to work harder in order to get just as far. And I did an experiment with my students in my classroom with happened to be 3rd and 4th graders. But there's also a video that if your viewers wanted to watch it, it explains what racism is about. It's called The Unequal Opportunity Race.
Okay.
It's on YouTube. It's a cartoon, and it's only about 4.5 minutes, but it really points out how
It's something you
the race
produced?
is different. No, I did not.
Okay,
It was
okay.
produced by some other people. But it points out how white people got a head start. And I liken it to a 100-meter race. That poor white people start at 0 all the way up to the Rothschilds, who are at plus 97. Those are people who sell arms on both sides in a war, so they're going to get their money no matter what. And, everybody goes up from there. People of color are behind the starting line, all the way back to black people, who are the most maligned in this country. We're back at minus 50. And I like to say we're back at minus 50 blindfolded, carrying a piano, one leg tied behind our back. And those of us who have the tenacity and have the help and skill to make it to the finish line, we either wind up slightly behind, even, or slightly ahead. And the question is, how do you manage to do that? And the answer is that you have to work harder. You cannot let down. You know that you have to be better in order to get almost as far.
But would you say also that blacks basically were the only ones that was part of that race when it first started, if you will?
Well,
Because now other folks have gotten in the race, and guess what? They're a little ahead of blacks.
Well, it's very interesting when you stop and study the history of the United States, and I mean the real history. Not there's a book called Lies My Teacher Told Me,
Okay.
and it's about the history that teachers who unwittingly teach to children, because we teach the books that we are given, and we teach what we're taught. Unless you have the wherewithal to go find out and investigate for yourself the true history of the United States, and true history is kind of like an iceberg 1/10 of an iceberg shows a 9/10 is hidden. And that's the real history of our country. And the original plan was to get rid of the Indians. And, they did a lot of different things. They killed them. They knew that alcohol was bad for them, so they gave them alcohol. They tricked them. They made, treaties and never kept up with the treaties, never kept their promise on the treaties. I mean, we're still seeing that now with the oil, the pipeline. And then would give them blankets and clothing that had been worn by people who had diseases that the natives never had, and then they would die from the disease too. So, and they thought about having the natives as slaves, but because it was their land, they knew how to get away. And plus, they could not tell the difference between the Native Americans and the white people once they got out there in the sun and started working. So they brought people from Africa who were very markedly different and brought them here. And the slave trade wasn't just here, it was all over the world.
Yes.
And, when you stop and look at what had happened in Spain with the Inquisition, that was to kill off all the Muslims who had come up from Africa and help bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. So there's a whole history here that's real interesting. I mean, this is an aside that many people don't know, that the reason, one of the things that people in this country seem to get upset with is Muslim women wearing hijabs. And and the more covering is the burqa, which is the woman that's covered from head to toe and only the eyes show. Those coverings came about because the Christians went into the Middle East looking for the Holy Grail, and the women were being raped as the Christians came through and pillaged. So when they raped, they were killing the men, raping the women, and these women are beautiful. If you look at the women from the Middle East, they have color to their skin, they have black hair, beautiful contrast between skin color and eyes. They were being raped. So they covered the women up to protect them. It's kind of gone, beyond that now, where in some Muslim countries the women don't wear coverings and in others they do. But this was started because of the Christians. Not because of the Muslim culture, but because of the Christian culture that the women started covering themselves. So there's a whole history that people don't know, and it's out there. It's in books.
Not just for a moment. Now, as you're going through this and discussing this and whatever, why hasn't it been taught in the school? Could you imagine, I'd say the majority of the folks who are viewing this right now, in all due respect, no exposure. Why? I'm thinking about Carol Smith when you made the point about Carol, and in terms of her basically giving you the go ahead to, hey, follow through this piece. What happened? Why wasn't there someone lobbying saying we're going to put this in our educational system and we're going to use this as guidelines to introduce this to the legislature?
Well, it has been.
What happened?
It has been.
And I'm not
back in the 80s, Portland Public Schools did what was called the started with the African American baseline essays, and Dr. Carolyn Leonard, was in charge of that program. Eventually, we had the African American, the Native American, the Latino American, the Asian American, Native American, on and on and on. Different ethnic groups, their history was told, and these essays were written. And I went back to a conference, NABC, National Association of Black School Educators, in 1988. And they were talking about Portland, Oregon, and the great work that we had done in Portland and have these essays and everything. They weren't being used in Portland. They were not being used. The teachers refused to use them. And I remember, I will never forget, when they were first introduced. I was on an oversight committee when I had just come back in '85 and was selected to be on an oversight committee for the district representing Portland Association of Teachers. And we had this big workshop where teachers from around the district were invited to come, and Janice Ingersoll, who was an amazing teacher, she's retired now, but she was talking about music. And talking, she mentioned that, where the history of black people in Africa and how we had brought music and different genres of music that came here to this country. This, I will never forget this. People were saying, it was like Obama in the Congress. That's a lie.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, because they have been told that this is their creation. And so, not understanding that this is not part of your history, this is not part of your culture. So it would be really kind of hard for you to come up with things like jazz. That's not, that kind of rhythm is not part of the European culture. So there are so many things, and not understanding what the true history is.
But who's holding it back? That's the thing that gets me, because even when Leonard was coming up, I can still remember when that was happening, and that but there were certain elements, black organizations within our own community, that didn't like that. They were coming up with their own ideas of what they
I'm not
should
sure
have
who those were.
I'm just kind of
okay.
I'm not even want to put name names,
but I
there's
will
some
say
entities out
this.
there that were,
I will say
we know them all.
I will say this, that textbooks generally come from the state of Texas.
Right.
Publishers
That's right.
go with whoever publishes the most books, and whatever the person who publishes the most books wants, that's what's in the textbook.
You're right.
Texas is the
they
largest
signed off. Yep.
the largest purchaser
Yep.
of textbooks, and so if you look in the textbooks, there's a just a cursory, less than a chapter about the Civil War.
Right.
There's very little. Let it be told, there's very little contribution that African Americans have made to this country. And one day I was going through, I don't know if you knew McKinley Burke.
I know McKinney. Yep.
And he wrote a book about the inventions of African Americans.
Yes.
And I started looking through that book, and then there was a poster that I don't have any longer, but it showed all these things that African Americans invented. Things like the dustpan, the mop, the broom,
Yes.
the mailbox, the pencil sharpener, the street light, refrigerator cars, the couplings for the railroads, all these different inventions. And I thought, really, I just assume the white people did it, because that is the default when you're talking about, if you don't say a black man or a Native American man or a Latino man, then the default, if you say man, means that it's a white person. And so I started thinking about that, and I said, well, no, they wouldn't have invented those things, because they weren't the ones doing the work. It was the slaves who were doing the work. And so what was really intriguing was when I went to the South and went on a tour of plantations in Louisiana, and they kept talking about the servants. And I had to stop and ask, excuse me, did they have servants as well as slaves? Because you keep talking about the servants, and I'm of the understanding that there were slaves here. The answer was, well, that we like to call them. So I said, no, servants are people who have have options. They are hired, they are paid a salary, and they can quit. Slaves don't have options.
Right.
So all of these things are to assuage the conscience and to smooth over the ugliness that is the history of this country.
Well, tell me this, and again, thinking about Portland, Oregon, if you will. You'd mentioned McKinley Burke and what he had been doing. And in fact, I remember that book, because he was, at one point in time, I used to own the Portland Observer newspaper, and he and I were pretty tight. And he authored a number of stuff. But there was another guy that was sitting up in the same arena that did something similar to athletes, and that was Herman Brames.
Oh, well, see,
Remember
I didn't know that
Herman
Herman,
Brain?
I didn't know that, are you talking about the father or the son?
The son.
Okay.
The one who went to school at UVO, I guess, and
Yes.
in fact helped Nike, if you will, and ran with those boots, and it was part and parcel. He didn't get much of the benefits, but he had. In fact, I still have it.
Okay.
I have that thick binder, and he talked about athletes, and it's a beautiful piece. But again, he tried to get it into the school system, and they wouldn't
Couldn't
buy
do
it.
it.
He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. Very articulate guy, still around.
Yeah.
I mean, his brothers are still around also too. But again, I guess what
I
I'm
went to
saying
high
is,
school with Herman.
yeah, you see what I'm saying. But my point is that and like yourself, and whatever, we always have folks within our communities, historically speaking, that have done the things that like your dad did, and you can trace that in all these individuals, activists, and whatever, for the betterment, if you will, towards the assimilation to white folks about black folks that could have helped. If those things were those so-called uh, that information was basically in the schools and being taught, that would have helped the situation out of this
What do you
country.
mean by the assimilation?
Assimilation, what I mean is that rather than just the black and white, they're just Americans, just like anyone else, if you will. You got me? Because the person with the key that says, okay, fine, you're either an American or a slave, were the majority whites.
Well,
And they made the Irish, and I mean, my point is that and we just went through a process with reference to the Latinos, where at one point in time they were looked upon as whites in certain areas. I mean, I've written about
only
that
when
piece.
it's convenient.
Well, I'm just saying, but
Only when it's
when we
convenient.
went through this whole affirmative action thing, that whole business about working and this, that, and the other, I interviewed some folks who were Mexican Americans, and I interviewed. In fact, I still got some of the articles in my American Contractor publication. This guy was a contractor, and he said his dad told him point blank when he came here to this country, that he told him that you will not marry another Mexican.
Wow.
You'll marry a white.
Wow.
And he did. A very prominent contractor.
Wow. Okay.
So I'm just saying there's a lot of things. And I'm not saying this is not negative history, but I'm just saying those are some of the issues that were on the table. Here I am you and I, we've been around here talking about this stuff for years. And then I'm sitting there saying, well, who's going to pick up the baton? That's what I'm saying. That's why I said your dad gave it to me. And then all of a sudden now, who do I give it to? Who do you give it to?
Well, I think in terms of assimilation, the issue is that.
Hold on just for a second. Let me tell these guys. I know these guys wanted to break in about now, and then we'll come back. But give us an extra 10 minutes. And so when we come back, we're going to just spend our time on the race.
Okay.
Let's get another 10 minutes right now.
Okay.
Just going on. Then we're breaking it. Give us another. We're breaking another 10 minutes. Let's say 40. Okay. All right. Good. Thank you. All right. Go on.
So, in terms of assimilation for African Americans, you have to look at that we are a people who were taken from our country. And one of the things that I think that a lot of people who come here and criticize African Americans, people who are the descendants of enslaved Africans, about is that we didn't fight back, we didn't leave. And the problem was that we were brought over on a boat. We didn't know where we were.
Right.
It would be totally different if we were like the Latinos when the Spanish came into South America. They were on their homeland, so they knew where they were. They knew what the lay of the land was.
Mm-hmm.
It's totally different than Native Americans who were on their
Right
homeland.
here. Yeah.
We had African Americans who had never been over to the next farm. We didn't know what was out there. We didn't know how far we were from the water. We didn't know if there was any sanctuary anywhere until there started being some infiltration of other peoples to come and bring information.
Mm-hmm.
And then people knew, and people, when slaves were allowed to go with their masters to other places, they could bring information back saying, the river is this way, this is, at this part of the country there's freedom. And slavery was all over. Don't get confused. On Wall Street, it was economics.
It was economics. It was just, hey, look, we need these folks to clear up this land, and the homeland said, look here, we're going to send, besides the blacks, if you will, we're going to send all the poor folks. We're going to throw all these folks together, and you know what I'm saying. And we're going to send some managers over there with them. And
well, there was a recent study that said that that the United States is an oligarchy, which means you have a ruling class, and you have the poor underneath. Mm-hmm. And the best thing that ever happened to the oligarchy in this country, they didn't want a king, but they wanted to be the upper class.
Oh, yeah.
And so the best thing that they did was when they looked around, especially in the South, and said, wait a minute, we've got more black people than we have white people.
Yeah.
And so we're in danger of the white people and the poor white folks who were also indentured
Right.
slaves, and then the African slaves getting together and overthrowing us.
Yeah.
So what they did is, and to this day, all these people who are espousing this hatred and negativity are being the pawns of the 1%, the 10%, who are saying, you might not be nothing, but at least you ain't the N-word. At least you're not a Muslim.
Yeah,
At least you're not a Mexican.
Yeah.
And so those are the people who are doing the dirty work to hold down people of color so that they can be seen as being better. And I always like to say, if you're smarter and you're better, then you don't have to put anybody down in order to move ahead. So, you know, I looked at some pictures recently, and the hate and the venom that I see on the faces of the people who are so caught up on this whole thing and preparing for this race war. This isn't a race war. This is a class war. And what they don't realize, I meant to bring one of the posters. I would love for your viewers to go to the NASA website.
NASA website.
And look at the posters.
They can Google it, right? Google
NASA.
Google
and I
NASA.
went, NASA. I went there myself, and they have posters of where they are inviting people to come to NASA and to go to Mars. To go to Mars.
I can see that.
Because that's the next frontier.
Yeah,
go be a farmer on Mars. Go be a builder on Mars.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
do these people who are spewing all this venom and hatred, do they think that they are going to take them with them? I know how people who are in the ruling class think about me. I know how they know. But poor white people, working class and middle class people don't know. They think that they are going to be taken. They are not going to be taken.
Well, that was why I talked to the whole issue of assimilation and the educational system. You know, it's like anything else. You know, once you get educated, it's not in the school. It's not in the classroom. The poor folks that don't have access. Now they do now, because guess what? We got the smartphone and we got the iPhone. You can Google anything.
Yes, you can, if you know what to ask.
That's what I'm saying.
If you know what to ask.
Yes.
And I was at a
something.
workshop at Roosevelt, and there were young girls, African American girls, and one of them said, well, they didn't teach us our history. And I thought, well, wait a minute, they don't like you. So why would you think they would teach you your history? But the other piece is that the average teacher is a white female who's in the bottom 50% of their class, because they haven't taken higher math or science. And so what happens is that they are duped into thinking that what's in these books is real too. Were it not for my parents, and God bless her, my sister, who did a lot of research and turned me on to a lot of things, my sister Galena, I would not know. I would be sitting there hearing and reading and espousing the same things. But because I was taught by my parents and given further education and tools to look at through my sister, I was able to find out some information on my own. I think that's very important for people to do, is to go out and research and find out.
So you're making the point about the fact that we're all creatures of our exposure.
Yes, we are.
And if you're not exposed, our parents or someone or whatever, guess what? You're just sort of left in the dark. And then the majority, i.e., tend to control what's out, but they don't share, if you will, their exposure. Then it's economics. Then it's dollars.
Well, yeah.
You know, just follow the dollars. You know what I mean? Look, we can go on. You know, we can go on and this stuff.
We could.
That's why I wanted to spend this amount of time just to give the viewing audience an opportunity. The kind of person who would put something together like Race Talk. You know what I mean? And who happens to be the founder and the director. And so we're going to have her on again. But we're going to go on and take this break, because we want to spend some time talking about this historical piece within black women, because from a historical standpoint, from blacks for that matter, the black woman was always the front person.
For a reason.
No, I'm just saying, yes, you know what I'm saying?
For a
so,
reason.
but my point is that we're going to stick to the historical deal right here, because it is going to be historical, because in all due respect, it's going to be as far as I'm concerned, both of them got elected. I wish we had 2 slots there, but anyway. But we're going to take a short break, folks, and we're going to come back and not necessarily continue this, okay, but we're going to just kind of transfer a bit and talk a little bit more about that. But we're going to get to this race that
All
people
right.
want to look at, because I want to make sure that people go to this event. Very
All
important.
right, thank you.
Take a short break, folks. Be right back, and we'll come right back.
You are watching Oregon Voters Digest. This program can be seen again on these channels on these dates and times. Tell a friend.
Welcome, folks. Again, I'm Bruce Broussard, your host, Oregon Voters Digest, and we've had the opportunity and pleasure of having, as far as I'm concerned, a very renowned person here and a one of a kind here in Oregon with her background. And I'm talking about Donna Maxey. She's here, and if you missed that first part of the show, you need to go back. There's going to be some replay times and there's things of that nature that you can go to and pick it up. But it's on YouTube. It'll be on YouTube. A lot of times we will not have it just directly on, depending. But tomorrow, like Monday or Tuesday, it's there. You can just Google Oregon Voters Digest, and you'll see Donna and myself. We're talking about this stuff. But it's very, very important. It's a very timely interview. So we're going to go on now, and like I said, you go back and check that out. But now we're going to go on and go back to. We're going now to this race here, this candidates forum, Portland's first African American female City Council member Joanne Hardesty, featuring Joanne Hardesty and Loretta Smith, and we're going to spend some time with that because she's going to be holding, I'd say, the first forum. In fact, let him put it on the screen. Can we put that on the screen? Put that on the screen there, on the right-hand side or whatever. That's going to be like kind of a little prop, if you will. Put that on the screen. Okay, can you do it? Oh, well, I see. You want it that way? Is that the way you want it? Do I have it set up now? Right? You got it? Okay, this way. Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
Team.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Just keep that up there right there if you don't mind. Okay, so we're going to jump right up into that deal. And again, like I said, she's the founder of Race Talks. And in fact, you could Google that on YouTube. And
We have a website.
You got a website? What's
We
that
do.
website? Put that website on there too,
Race
if you don't mind,
Talks.
at the bottom.
www.racetalkspdx.
Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Just put that down at the bottom down below, and then we'll just kind of talk a little bit about that to remind them. And you good. You got that date just down below, just a little bit to kind of give you an idea of when this is going to take place, Tuesday, August the 14th. Can you come down with that Race Talk piece just a little bit down below there a little bit? You can't? Okay, good. All right. Well, anyway, that looks good. That looks good. Let's talk about your organization, and you're going to be putting this on. Okay. What's the deal?
We're in our 8th year.
Okay.
We're closing out our 8th year with Race Talks. I started this because I felt that we needed to be having conversations.
Okay.
We're all in this race together. And I think what really turned my head was years ago, back in the early 70s, I saw a program on TV that showed 2 scientists, and they had 2 globes that were connected, and they started with 2 lab rats. And they sat back and they watched, and they put in a finite amount of air, water, and food, and just sat back and filmed and watched what happened. And what happened was what we see happening on the globe now, is that the population got out of control. People were starting to have, the rats were having mental illness, the mothers were killing the young, the husbands, the males were killing them. There were marauding bands of youth, and they just watched. They kept putting in the same amount of air, water, food until they all died.
Okay. Okay.
And we have the option. I think of us as being thinkers, that we can think, we can make decisions. We don't have to destroy the earth.
Okay.
You know, man has been on earth for hundreds of thousands of years. The European culture has been in charge for the last 3,000 years.
Okay.
And in 3,000 years, we have come to the brink of extinction of this earth, where we are, and they have colonized every nook, cranny, and corner of the earth. And there is, we're on the brink of extinction.
But we're talking about historical change here. We got a change. We got a change coming. We got a change coming in this race.
Yes, we do, and we have to be realistic about where we are.
Okay.
In the human race.
Okay.
So that we can look and say, okay, we have to use the resources of everyone that is here.
Okay.
We can't just continue to look at a group of people that is set off as being the ones who should control. You have to use the wisdom and intelligence and wherewithal of everyone. We're very fortunate in that we have two very wise, experienced women who happen to be African American, who happen to be female. These are two people who are very qualified. Loretta Smith has worked in Senator Ron Wyden's office for over 20 years. And had experience there, and then became a county commissioner. Joanne Hardesty has been a community activist since she's been here, and has been in the Oregon legislature.
Yeah, 2 terms, yeah.
You know, she must have been really good, because they passed a law saying that you could not be in the legislature for more than 2 terms or something. There was some kind of law they passed, and then as soon as she left the legislature, they rescinded the law. So clearly Joanne was doing her job, or they would not have helped, written up a law that was to get rid of her. We presently have a number of people who are in the legislature right now. One who has made international news, Janelle Bynum, who was out. She has a very interesting district. She has Happy Valley, and she also has part of Gresham out in the Numbers. And so you have she has a very wealthy and a very poor district at the same time. She was out canvassing her district, and someone called the police on her, which seems to be, I call it beckery, the thing that is happening. It started with Barbecue Becky in Oakland, who called on the black people who were out there. And so she was just out canvassing her district, trying to get votes. And I worry about Loretta and Joanne. What's going to happen? They're out. They're meeting with people. They're going door to door. Are people going to call on them? These are two very intelligent women, and they, like I said, they happen to be African American.
Well, tell me this: do you think then that the media is pretty well? They should be well aware of these 2 individuals, because they've been writing the news. I'm talking about the Willamette Week. You've been talking about the Tribune, the Oregonian. We've got 2 black newspapers. You got the Scanner. You got the Observer.
Well, the person who called on Janelle Bynum, did they ask who she was, or did they just call the police?
But she wasn't in Portland. She's not in Portland, Oregon. You know what I'm saying? In terms of this is Mecca as it relates to black folks in Oregon. In Portland, Oregon, Northeast Portland. We're all supposed to be living there, residing there. I'm very familiar with Bynum's race. In fact, she's running against a Hispanic, the mayor of that area. And it's kind of interesting because they've had more. It was the largest fundraising race. In fact, it's made history. One spent over $1 million, and the other one another $800,000 or so. So they're at the top of the deal. So that's a different situation. My point is that to a certain degree there's an assimilation to a certain degree of Janelle, because she knows the politics. She's a businesswoman. She's well known in that particular area. But here in our arena, where we talk about the whole issue of race, is in Portland, Oregon. Right. You got me? And that's why I'm making that point about, and I'm feeling you, that's the historical moment. Are we at that point now that we might be able to change the course, because the so-called efforts of gentrification is here? I mean, it's got the big G, and there's a big wipe out here in the Portland metropolitan area aspect of it. Historically, there's always been a black community here in Northeast Portland, and there ain't any.
Right.
And there's a small deal, and I'm looking at these folks getting back to the table and saying, "Hey, wake up."
Well, one of the advantages of having people who are not at the top of the ladder, who understand the people who are at the bottom of the ladder. For instance, name an issue that's important to you.
Well, we're talking about housing, real estate.
Okay, housing's important. Housing's important to everyone, whether you're at the top of the income ladder or at the bottom. But people who are at the bottom of the income ladder have issues that people at the top don't have. Sometimes, and the only way I can liken to what I'm saying and to get the point across quickly is
the American
to say,
dream, see?
Right, is when I'm riding in my car, I listen to the radio. When I want to just be a person, I listen to NPR. When I want to, because all the issues that are on NPR affect me.
Mm-hmm.
Climate warming, forest fires, drought, all of those things affect me. And then I listen to programs, sometimes I listen to KBMS and listen to Al Sharpton when I want to be black.
Mm-hmm.
Because not only is it the NPR stuff, but it's also the issues that affect the African American community that affect me.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I don't feel like being a human, and so then I listen to music that doesn't have any words.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you represent a community that is at the bottom of the spectrum, you understand all of the issues, and you can address the issues for the whole spectrum of the community.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to someone, you were mentioning that our mayor had a silver spoon in his mouth. He doesn't understand what people at the bottom are going through. Not personally. Not knowing people. Not being exposed to those people. Joanne and Loretta know those people.
Mm-hmm. Well,
they don't know them all personally, but they know their circumstances.
Okay, I know we got about 5 minutes.
Okay.
And I want to kind of get a sense for them to help them out in terms of, because this what this show is doing. Hopefully, what this show is doing, and this as my goal is to kind of educate the media a bit in terms of how they should be interviewing these folks, so that when they do get to that point of identifying one of these individuals as far as endorsements and things of that nature, which is very important.
Right.
Which is very, very important, that they give the respect to both of them. Got me? And it's about issues across the board. Because there's going to be an endorsement, but the idea is to be fair. If it's going to be a negative campaign to do fake news on this issue, then you kill both. Because this is the first term, if you will, for an individual. And in that business, we're going to be looking at maybe 5 or 6 terms, because you can run on an ongoing basis.
Right.
And it's going to be very important that these folks are focusing on issues for a city across the board.
Right.
So there's going to be an on-the-job training at some point with this situation to begin with. So I think it's going to be very, very important. That's why we're doing this piece right now. That's why I'm really liking the fact that Race Talk is doing this first. And hopefully the media will be given the opportunity to understand how important this is, and that they just don't make a mockery of it and don't play games with it and do the fake news stuff. And because they've made some very negative statements about both of these folks. Like, for instance, the mayor didn't even endorse either one of them. Okay, that's an interesting piece. Most cases they do.
They do.
They didn't do it this time around.
But
okay?
there's another way to look at it too. The mayor is hedging his bets because he doesn't want to disenfranchise or alienate either of them, because he knows that could be difficult with alienation. I don't know.
No,
I don't know him personally.
He got the money.
He
can put the money in the deal. Then
I understand.
There's no alienation with money. If you got the money.
I understand. I do want to say this about the media and these two women, ladies, politicians. I hope they will not come at them as women. We already have 2 females on the city council, so they have made decisions that have nothing to do with their gender. I do believe that their gender will help them to understand some exigencies in issues that maybe males won't. The fact that they are both African American will help them to understand some things that maybe some of the other city council members won't. but it does not mean that they are limited just to those issues. This is why we're having this, is because this is the first time that there will be an African American female on the city council. I feel that the city council will be a much better council for having had a person of color on it, and the fact that one of them is going to win. So we have it, normally we have race talks at McMenamin's Kennedy School. We've had so much interest in this that we're going to, we had the venue at Kennedy School is not large enough.
Okay.
So McMenamin's has graciously offered the Crystal Ballroom downtown.
Crystal Ballroom.
Which is
that's on Burnside
and between 13th and 14th on Burnside. And the address is 1332 West Burnside.
Right.
So,
right by the freeway exchange.
Right there by the freeway. So I'm hoping that people will come. The room will seat 700. If you have a van or you have mass transit, because there are parking garages down there, people will have to pay.
Yes, it's a
there are
big
people who are disabled.
What time is this?
So
what time is this?
It starts at 6:45.
It's a pretty traffic area too,
Yeah,
that time.
6:45 to 9:15. So what will happen is that Tricia Tillman is going to be the moderator. There are questions that are prepared for them.
Now, she was at Multnomah County one point in time, right?
She was. She
sued the county.
She had to, because she was an African American woman.
So what's the format? Is it going to be a debate kind of a deal? Or
No, it's not a debate. The
do?
whole idea is more for us to ask questions about issues and then to hear from them what their points of view are. I think it's more important to hear, do you agree with this person or not agree, and not to have them debating each other. These women have known each other for years and respected each other.
So they're going to be given the opportunity to just articulate themselves,
to articulate their own points of view, and the audience will have the opportunity to ask questions.
So that's forcing a debate. I mean, how are you going to be able to differentiate those
it's
who will
not
be
a
asking
debate.
questions? Who are going
Debate,
to be...
the difference between a forum and a debate is that in a forum, both person gets to give their point of view.
Okay.
In a debate, you give your point of view, I give my point of view.
Are they going to be on at the same time?
You refute me.
Are they going to be doing this at the same time?
Yes, but the difference is, wait a minute,
That's a
Bruce.
debate.
Wait a minute. No, because in a debate, if you don't like what I say, then you question me and I respond to it, and vice versa. There's not going to be any of this arguing back and forth across a point. The idea is for them to state what is their point of view and to get their point of view out there. We did this before. We had it on the issue. We had it on the issue of fluoride, of fluoridation,
Okay, well,
and how
you're talking about now.
we're talking about fluoridation and how it affected people of color. And so we had a program. There was a big hubbub about the fluoride issue. So
are you going to be able to identify those individuals who are partisan, if you maybe for Loretta or Joanne, and basically the partisan person who's let's say who may be for Loretta will ask questions that are in favor of hers and negative?
No, those questions are going to be asked of both of them.
So wait a minute, are you going to put the questions together?
Well, some questions we have put together, and others the audience will ask. And the question will be asked of both of them.
Are you going to have a press corps there to have
We're inviting the press.
We're going to be there. You're going to have a different section for them.
We're going to have it all.
You're going to get questions from them?
We just changed the venue Friday, so we haven't set it up yet.
Where'd you get the questions from? Where'd you get the questions from? Did you get
Well,
the media? And I can go there. Look at it. Look how good this thing is. You may have to come back. You may have to come back. Seriously. Look, folks, we're going to get her back here because we got a couple.